Hi, this is David from over at simplymaya.com, and I recently received a question on how to do a targeted shatter with Maya and Soup. So you can see here our shattered geometry has a lot of little bits in the center going out to larger bits here. And if I play this back and show you what it looks like, you can see that it's a very targeted shatter. This would be a ball crashing through a window, but you could do pretty much anything with this technique. Now this is going to be a very fast demonstration of this, and obviously it gets quite complicated, but I'm going to give you enough to hopefully get you started along the path. So I'm going to start with a new scene. Okay, just bring the grid in here, and I'm going to need some geometry to start with. So the question I received was about shattering a windshield. So I'm going to make something kind of glass-like, so just a box basically with a little bit of thickness to it. You can use a plane as well if you want. And now we're going to run through the process of getting a shatter on this, but more importantly getting a targeted shatter. Now this process is actually quite involved. There is a tutorial, a full tutorial over at Simply Maya called Breaking the Bank, where we go through shattering, bullet dynamics, bifrost and whatnot. So if you want to check that out, it's over at Simply Maya. However, this should be enough to get you started. So I'm going to start by creating some subdivisions here. So I'll probably just do 3 across and maybe 20 and 20. You want a decent bit of geometry to be working with. We also, before we start with anything else, need to delete the history and freeze the transformations. Let's just go to freeze transformations, edit, delete by type, history. If you skip these steps, things are going to get weird later on and they're not going to work. So, you might want to make sure that you get that step in there. Now we're going to use Soup. You can get the Soup plugin over at www.soup-dev.com, or if you just type Maya Soup into Google, it should be the first result that comes up. It's a fantastic suite of plugins, especially for dynamics, and the question I was asked mentioned using it, so I'm going to use it. Now make sure that is loaded in. So let's go up to the plugin manager and make sure I've got my Soup plugin loaded. I'm also going to use bullet dynamics, so I'll make sure I have that ticked. And there is, as I said on the tutorial on the site, there's a much greater rundown, much more in-depth look at Soup and what it can do. But for right now, as I said, we'll just get you to a starting point. So now we have this, we need to shatter it. But we need to shatter it in a specific position, as if a ball or a bullet had come through it. So to do this, we need to tell Soup where we want the shatter to happen. So I can go up to my Soup shelf and add a scatter node. Now this will scatter a whole bunch of points around here that the shatter can then use to base its calculations off. Now you'll notice that nothing seems to have changed. If I pop open the outliner here, you can see I've got a scatter node in. And if we look under the attribute editor, you'll see its attributes. The envelope is ticked, so it's working, but I can't see anything. This is because it won't be working with viewport 2. So if we go up to the renderer and hit legacy viewport, you now should be able to see these red dots. And if I just increase the density of dots, you'll definitely be able to see them now. Okay, so all of these dots represent a point of shattering, and at the moment they're all over the place. We're also just doing a volume shatter, and I'd like to do both a volume and a surface shatter. So now you can really see we're getting some points on there. But again, if I was to shatter this now, it would just break into thousands of tiny little pieces, which might be what you want. And if that is what you want, you can basically go ahead, put a shatter node on this and get going. If you want it more precise, however, we go down to texture and activate this texture map. Now we can use a texture map, a black and white texture map, or a grayscale works as well, where black will have no points on it, white will have maximum points on it, and grey will be everything in between. Now a quick way to do this is to just assign a new material. So a Lambert, for instance, and it really doesn't matter what color it is. We just don't want to be working on our initial shader, our Lambert 1. So then go to texturing, 3D paint tool, and if I pop open its options, I'm going to assign a texture. So give it a decent amount of resolution. For our purposes, 1K will be fine. Assign that texture, and now I'll be able to paint on this. So if we remember, black is going to have no effect, so there will be no points in black. So if I make the flood color black and flood fill the whole thing, make sure the brush color is on white, and now I can start drawing where I want this shatter to happen. So I'm going to put 1 point on the front here and 1 on the back. Now you can obviously UV this and get a more accurate paint amount in Photoshop or whatever you want, but this is just a very quick, crude way of getting a basic kind of map on here for the shatter to obey. So I'm going to go to Save Texture, and I need to create a project and save this scene first. So I'm going to go to Set Project, and I've got one here somewhere. There we go, Soup Shatter. So I'm going to set that as the project, and then I'll just have to save the scene. And I'll call this Shatter V2. There we go. Now I should be able to just hit Save Texture, and if we look down here, saved in Soup Shatter, Source Images, 3D Paint Textures, Shatter Polycube 1. Okay, so I need to know where that is because I'm going to use it now. So I'm going to go up to the Scatter node, activate that map, and then feed in that texture. So we'll go to File, and we'll pop open that texture. So Soup Shatter, Source Images, 3D Paint, Shatter version 2, Polycube color, and you'll see that the points now simply appear in that white circle. So now I've done that, I can select my Scatter node and go up to Create a Shatter. There we go, you'll see that shatter has been created on there. So Auto Evaluate on, and we don't want the distance too close together. If you have the distance of the shatter set at 0, what will happen is Bifrost, or sorry, not Bifrost, Bullet Physics, or whatever physics system you're going to use, has a very good chance of interpreting that as being intersecting geometry, and then all sorts of weirdness will happen. So give yourself a little bit of distance and hit Bake Result. Now go and get a cup of tea. This can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the complexity of the shatter, and how many scatter points you've got will determine how many kind of shattered fragments you get. So if this is going to bake out 500 or 600 different shattered objects, it can take a while. So I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, well that didn't take too long at all. It took maybe a minute. And you can see here where we had those white dots, you get a lot of little tiny fragments generated, and where we had the black, you're just seeing these big fragments. Now if I select this, this is the original cube, so I'm going to hide it, and this is the shattered result. You'll see it comes in with no shader on it, so we'll just bung Lambert 2 on there. In fact, let's assign a new one so we don't have that kind of white dot. And again, just assign a Lambert. Right, so now we can see what's what. We've got this shattered geometry, however, it's still in one piece. So we'll just do a mesh separate, and that will separate that all out into, so you can see in the middle here, we've got these tiny little chunks, and around the outside, we've just got these big bits where kind of the force of impact might shatter those down into larger pieces. Now, depending on the effect you're going for, you may need now to redo your scatter. You might need more kind of resolution in the center here, which you can get by increasing the point density of the scatter. So it gets quite difficult when you're dealing with scatter and shatter together, but anyway. Right, so now we've got this basic thing, and obviously if I hit play now, nothing's going to happen because it has no dynamics on it. It's simply shattered geometry. I'm also going to go back to viewport 2, and I'm just going to set my viewport 2 up, make sure I have some anti-aliasing on there, and some screen space ambient occlusion would probably be nice. So I'll flick that down to 8. And there we go. Right, so now I'm back on viewport 2 and I've got a basic setup so we can have a look at this. Now we need to create, and I'm going to turn the grid off and introduce a polygon plane, because in a minute we're going to introduce some dynamics to this, so we want it to look like that's bouncing there on the plane. Okay, now you'll see if I hit W, the pivot point for this is all the way down here, and the same remains true for every object. The pivot point is set at the origin. And before we introduce any dynamics at all, if you're using bullet physics, you're going to need to center all these pivot points. So come in, select your geometry, okay, and you can delete the history on this now, so just edit, delete by type, history, and also center all of these pivots. So modify center pivot. Now this again is a crucial step. If you don't do this, Bullet won't be able to calculate the rotation of these objects correctly, so they'll appear to have very weird behavior on them. So now we've got all that. Let's go up and select the group. And I apologize for that hammering you can hear in the background. They're refurbishing the office next to mine, so sorry if this is a bit noisy. But anyway, now we've got that, select the group, go up to the Bullet Physics tab and make a active body group set, so this one here, and that will create a rigid body group. So you can see here I've got a solved one. Okay, now if I hit play, you'll see that all just falls apart. It also falls right through the floor plane, but we'll deal with that in a second. So let's just go up to the bullet solver and introduce a ground plane, and there you go. You can see we had a very, very targeted shatter, lots of tiny pieces in the middle, and the reason that's jumping apart has a lot to do with the settings in Bullet. You know, and this can get very complicated from here. As I said, we've got a more complete tutorial, but this should be enough to get you started. If you want to smash something through this, let's create a little ball here, and let's get that at about the right space to smash through that geometry. There we go, that will go right through the center there. Perfect. So let's create a bullet active rigid body, that is, and you'll notice the squares come in shape, the shape has come in square. So let's go and change that to a sphere, because we're using a sphere, so it's a nice easy one to do. And let's give it some initial velocity. So let's see, initial forces would be here. Here we go, initial velocity, and let's make this 100 in x. So let's see what happens. There we go, that shoots through there, smashes the geometry. Okay, so that's a targeted shatter. Now if you wanted, you could make your ball a little bigger so it has a greater impact on the smash effect. There you go. And you'll see its velocity is quite slow as well, because when it hits that it's sort of bouncing off. But you can definitely see we've got a targeted shatter out of here, and we're smashing right through there quite nicely. Okay, so I hope this has been of some help. Like I say, this is actually a pretty complicated subject to deal with, especially in a short video like this one, but hopefully this has given you some ideas and it's helped to start you on the path. It should be enough information for you to get in there and start smashing stuff. So if you've got any questions, get me on the forum over at Simply Maya, and thank you very much for watching. Cheers.